Good morning, friends. I see a kind of a glaze on your faces, and I guess that's a result of the yoga early this morning. I'm sure you had a fruitful evening last evening, and this morning has started with fresh air. This morning we have Professor Sadagopan to speak to you. He's the director of IIIT. And this session is being chaired by Mr. V. Sheshagiri Rao, who is the Deputy Director and Controller of Satish Dhawan Space Center. Let me now request Mr. Sheshagiri Rao to conduct the session.
Professor Sangeeta Menon, Professor Sadagopan, my dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. Nowadays, the information technology is everywhere. Without information technology, no sector can grow to its current levels. Even the household gadgets will have some processor and some software component in it. It is a field where everybody feels that after agriculture, the most working force will be working in IT all over the world. Nowadays, we cannot see any executive without carrying any pen drive and a cell phone with IT-enabled services. We all know the Indian brains are the best brains in the world. This was demonstrated very well in our activities in the IT sector. One such best of the best brains today, Professor Sadagopan, we are happy to have with us such an eminent personality. He is the founder director of Indian Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore, since 1999. He had taught at IIT Kanpur, IIM Bangalore for 2 decades. And he has also taught for about a year at IIT Chennai and New Jersey, USA, IIT Bangkok, Thailand, and also at Temasek at Singapore. Some of the best universities he has visited, and he is a guest faculty there, and he is author of number of books, Management Information Systems, and ERP, a managerial perspective. He has also contributed chapters in several books, and he has published innumerable number of papers at IEEE Transactions, European Journal of Operations Research, Journal of Optimization Theory and Applications, and Naval Research Logistics Simulations, Station Support Systems. He is actually a consultant, and he has participated extensively as a consultant in private and public sector corporations in India, in computing, communications, software, automotive, oil and power industries, as well as in social sector. He is a member of board of directors of several private and public sector corporations. He is also a member of board of studies of several universities. He has travelled across all the continents and writes frequently in all aspects of information technology, addressing a wide range of audience, including students, educators, researchers. He is a regular contributor in the national newspapers, titling various aspects of the information technology. Now, on behalf of all of us, may I request Professor Sadagopan to deliver the talk.
Good morning. So, when Dr. Kasturi Rangan sends a note, you have no option but to say yes, he is such a person. And this particular course is something which I look forward to coming and meeting the participants, because there is very little which people like me can contribute. I think there are many people, including Mr. Seshagiri Rao, Mr. Kailasanathan, who are probably more competent to kind of talk about IT. I'm sure that there may be many more people. And one reason why I always agree to come is that I think Nias, Dr. Rangan and Dr. Sangeeta Menon must be complimented. They managed to assemble an amazing set of people year after year. And I think whether you attend any lecture and kind of listen to any of the eminent speakers or not, the fact that for a week together in one place that so many people could actually be assembled is a remarkable one. And I'm sure there is so much for you to learn just from the fellow participants, because you have the atomic to the space, to the nano, to the jumbo, you have the public sector to the private sector, okay? So in that sense, you have the pure R&D to the pure production, and some of the startup companies. I understand there is also one person who is also in the 20 plus, because normally in these groups we have 50 plus, but there is one person in the 20 plus. The only complaint, if at all, I was just telling Sangeeta, is that for some reason, hopefully things will change. It is at least changing in the industry where I interact mostly, called the IT industry. There's a very, very small percentage of women representation in this crowd. Okay, so hopefully that also will change. Of course, the country is changing. Okay, so what I thought I will do, this is a very difficult one to do justice, because as the famous statement goes, nobody knows the future, and predicting the future is a complete waste of time, because whatever predictions you do, it will go wrong. Okay, it's true in one sense, but I am sure that you all know that academics never give up. We actually have a journal called Journal of Forecasting. Okay, and as someone said that okay, so forecasting can never be accurate, but people keep trying to see whether they can do a better job of accuracy in forecasting. So that is how it is going. Second thing is that one can pitch it at so many levels. So I thought that for a diverse audience like this, and the fact that there has been the slowdown of the global industry, and obviously the IT industry in this country has been so globalized, so obviously it has its impact, and of course very recently we have the Satyam. Okay, all these things together, we will probably have some excellent discussion also. So what I am going to do is that maybe I will kind of stop around 10:20 or so that we have about little more than half an hour for kind of discussions. Okay, so what is that I want you to remember at the end of the lecture? Okay, the IT, I have very carefully written, it is not information technology. Okay, to me, at some point in time, whether it could be 20 years or 30 years, I don't know. Okay, IT will become what I call invisible technology. Okay, it will be there. Okay, I keep telling my students that 20 years later they would still be called as IT professionals. I don't know, because they will be doing IT. In fact, large more number of people will do IT in the years to come, but they may not necessarily call themselves IT professionals. Okay, so that is one line I want you to remember. The future of IT is it will become invisible. I think some of us feel, I think one of the good things about this technology is in the last 40, 50 years where we have been around, so we could see it all, like, in fact, Mr. Seshagiri Rao was telling that he still remembers vividly the punched card days, etc. In the sense, the 5 generations we could see in one human generation. So in that sense, we are kind of lucky. And what it actually means is something like this, that as we are kind of doing more and more of it, okay, what is the one essence that runs through all of them? I would call it, the previous generation had a generic notion of an engine. Okay, so do not necessarily think of it as a steam engine or an internal combustion engine, or it could even be electrically powered, but it actually gave an amplification of a muscle power. Okay, so the true contribution of engine is the amplification of muscle power. So IT, in some sense, is an amplification of brain power. So today, I'm sure so many people are doing with engine, okay? And there are people who don't touch an engine but still call themselves an engineers, okay? So what has happened is, look at IT in the same class. I think that is what it does. It essentially gives a way of amplifying your thought power, brain power, okay? So obviously it is a far deeper subject, so it will be around for so long. But at some point in time, engine was very specifically steam engine, and so many fellows thought that, what should be the size and the shape and the color of the steam engine, what should be the what kind of coal it should get, all these things were important. After some time, all those things have become unimportant, The railways used to run all their engines through steam engines, but today I think they all have kind of gone to the museums, but railways continue. So IT will continue, but may not be in its present form. So many of us are likely to kind of think of IT through what we see today, but much of what we see today may not even exist. Okay. So let me of course, obviously, in order to kind of drive home this point, I have to start somewhere. So I will kind of quickly take a look at what is happening and how this metamorphization is kind of happening. And of course, one more reason why in India we take IT more seriously is the fact that, it's very interesting that within a short about 20 years or so, okay, we have created in some sense this industry which accounts for about 6.8% of GDP today. It's about 6-7% of GDP comes from this. So obviously, that is the reason why many countries are kind of looking at India. And of course, at some point in time, it is nice to be exuberant, but sometimes the exuberance can even get into jingoism, and even people have used the word India's IT superpower and stuff like that. It's kind of discount all of them. We are nowhere near. I think the word superpower itself personally is a bad word for me, because I think the most powerful people are the most humble people. Okay, so Gandhiji never went and said he's a Mahatma. Much later people decided to call him Mahatma. Okay, so in that sense, okay, we are kind of close to number one, number two kind of position, because as you can imagine that we account for just 6 companies account for about more than 8% of the global IT outsourcing. A few things we have done. So obviously, I will spend a few minutes and also on the Indian IT. Sometimes we feel happy that we all could contribute a little bit. Okay, and that is how this lecture will go. Okay. Of course, broadly, if you really look at it, the future is just going in this direction. This is something that has been going on, and this will go on for a reasonable amount of time. At least 10-year timeline is quite clear. People had even fixed some targets, what will happen. So I'm not going to give you all the numbers, but nonetheless, okay? Faster, cheaper, better. Okay. So you all know famous law called Moore's Law that was actually mentioned by, in a kind of popular electronics article. Somebody wrote this, Gordon Moore, who's later the Intel CEO, wrote as to what is called the power of the microprocessor will double every 18 months. And almost for 30 plus years, it has remained. And more interesting stuff, that's where I think the contribution of material science people and the fabrication people, that, if things become faster, but they're not reliable, they're not useful. They've also been equally reliable. And of course, if it is faster, but they are not affordable, it's still not useful. So faster, they have become better in terms of reliability, and they also become cheaper, But for the fact that they were affordable, a country like India would have never touched or never been touched by IT, because, we are still economically poor country. And each one of them, basically a machine consists of some processor, some memory, and some I/O devices. So this is something all of us have learned as the introductory computing course. There's a little block diagram. We talk of processor, memory, and I/O. So each one of them have evolved phenomenally. We had several ranges of materials which characterize the processor. We had several forms. Okay, and what is actually happening is that the linear growth kind of is getting stalled because, beyond a point, the physics of the materials does not allow us to do something. And you would have seen that when the IBM PC came, it came with a 4.77 megahertz clock rate. We could go from 4.77 to 10 to 20 to 100. Then we came to 1000 megahertz. So we got what is called 1 gigahertz. We could go to 1.5, we could go to 2, we could go to 2.5, we could go to 3. But after 3, in fact, to be precise, 3.43, okay, so people have actually not been able to go. Because what happens is the rate at which you generate heat, you are not able to dissipate fast enough. So obviously, we don't have 4 gigahertz processors and 5 gigahertz processor. Chances are we may never have. So people are now saying that, look, okay, can I go in the other dimension? Can I go in some sense of a paralleling? So what you see as a multi-core, already in the last couple of years, the chances are, if you buy a machine today, most of them, whether you buy it from Intel or from AMD or from Sun or IBM, okay, all of them are what is called multi-core. That means within one processor, you could think of as multiple processors. Once again, there is some optimization happening. They try to find out, which is the mathematics part, which is the logical part. You have more of one, you have more of the other. It also depends on application, whether it is a gaming, whether it is a server, you have different uses. But all of them, in fact, I gave one example. Cell is a processor from IBM, which powers things like, I'm sure many of your children and grandchildren might be using a Sony PlayStation. It actually is powered by an IBM power processor, okay? So the processors are. So what happens is we continue this faster, better, cheaper, but because we got hit in one dimension of improving the clock rate, we are really looking at multiprocessor. This will go on, okay? But what probably might happen, we'll actually talk about it when we take up things like cloud computing, okay? So the chances are more of the power will come from somewhere and not necessarily from your desktop or a laptop or a palm top, whatever you call it, okay? So that is something happening. There will be more processing power, but will it happen right on the desktop or the laptop? We don't know. Okay? That is where, okay? The memory, because like you remember, many of you might have started using a computer. I'm sure Mr. Seshagiri Rao, when he talked of the punched card days, we used to talk of kilobytes of memory. So we used to have kilobytes of memory, to megabytes of memory, to gigabytes of memory, and terabytes of memory, at least on the secondary storage. A large university like IIT Kanpur used to have 1 terabytes of memory for the whole institute as late as 1987. Okay, so of course now we have a terabyte. The chances are there will be half a terabyte on this laptop. And I think on my iPhone I have maybe 64 gigabytes. Okay, so things keep changing. Okay, and we're also looking at new forms of memory, because we no longer have to consume much of power. Like one of the things which, because many of you come from such diverse background, it might be instructive for you to know that just 3 companies, Yahoo, Microsoft, and Google, okay, together almost consume 12% of the entire electrical power needed to power all the servers in the world. That means the search business, okay, is actually contributing to 12% of the consumption of electricity by all the compute servers around the world. So obviously, okay, so powering the memory takes so much amount of energy. So people have been looking at alternate forms, and one form, it's kind of coming, it's still not going very far, but slowly happening, is what is called the memory which you find as a flash memory, okay, the NAND flash memory, which you keep finding. In fact, some of the phone devices use it in some small form, and probably one of the first one on the computer to use this happens to be a company called Asus, a Taiwanese company, has been making a PC, and it's kind of going very well. It's called ePC. It's easy to learn, easy to entertain, easy to educate PC, which is completely powered by what is called the flash memory. Okay, so in the sense that And you might have seen there is a whole generation of new PCs which are actually selling, particularly 2008. They actually sold much more than the normal PCs and all. They're called net PCs. So the idea is that you have a minimal amount of power and you take more from the internet. Okay, many of them are powered by flash memory. So you can actually, the power consumption could be as low as 1 watt. Typically the desktops used to be consuming almost 200 watts. And in the 90s, there was a big efficiency movement. We kind of brought it down to about 80 watts. And some of the newer ones will consume about 30, 40 watts. And the EPC consumes about 1 or 2 watts. So there is certain amount of power consumption saving thanks to the memory. And of course, Apple, when they introduced their very thin notebooks are called Apple Mac Air, it was introduced along with the flash RAM. That's happening. A lot is happening on the display front. You all know that even in the phone, in a typical mobile phone particularly, the largest amount of power consumption happens to power the display. And if you happen to have this kind of smartphones with a larger amount of display like this, obviously because you are almost kind of having a 3.2-inch display, so it takes a fair amount of power. Okay, so people have been really looking at, can we have alternate ways of, okay, and remember power is needed, you have displays like this, you have displays like this projector, so a whole bunch of displays are there. And this OLPC, okay, there is basically using what is called this, a special form of organic LEDs, okay, people are able to now make newer forms of display. OLPC is the one laptop per child. It's a pet project of one professor at MIT, okay, and they have been kind of trying to make what is called a $100 PC for the high schools. They have never been able to bring it to $100, but nonetheless, it was a good move, okay. So what happens is that, imagine something like this, like this is our goal, okay. So can I take my hanky, kind of stick it on a wall, and can it become a display? Okay. So there are almost prototypes like this. You have cloths which can be rolled like this, okay, and they actually have LEDs embedded in them, okay, essentially in some kind of organic matter, and they can become the display. The good thing is, display devices like this will consume maybe 1/10 to 1/20th of a watt. So obviously they're very good, and you don't really have to have these huge things like this, okay. I could kind of, on your sheet which you see, I can actually display it. And at least there is one company called Amazon which actually sells a reader which actually, you can actually read books on it. It is as less training, it won't be as strenuous as looking at a typical LCD screen. So it is almost like reading a paper. Okay, and the way in which Amazon does it is that I can refresh every day. It is something like this. Nobody has to come and physically distribute paper for you. Okay, so you have a white sheet, and every day morning it becomes the newspaper of the day. Okay, so things like this are actually happening. So more and more of, okay, we will see a substantial amount of changes. Things like your ATMs, etc., etc. They don't have to have these very expensive displays. So you will have very simple forms of display. That is also happening. And of course, if you are really talking of mobile devices, you need a dramatic improvement in battery, both in terms of efficiency, also in terms of reusability. You all know that on one hand, we thought that IT industry is a very nice industry, it's a green industry. But when you actually open up a machine, you know that IT industry is one of the most polluting industry. And particularly if you really look at mobile phones, the batteries used to be terrible things. Okay, so now a lot more things are happening. There is a recent experiment last year in RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where they're really talking of, making a piece of paper into a battery. Okay, so it's kind of first prototypes are there. There may be another 8 years away from production, so things like that happening. And of course, last but not the least, computers and communication are together. The more we communicate, the more we compute, the more we need to communicate. The more we communicate, the more we need to compute. So people are really looking at better and better bandwidth. A place like IIT Kanpur, like most of the IITs and IIMs used to be very happy when they had a 64 kilobits of dedicated link. They upgraded to 2 megabits of dedicated link. But actually, if you have 3G and WiMAX, you will get 2 megabits for each one of you on your phone. So what used to be available for a large institution or a university will be available to you. And more interesting, you don't have to go, it is available to you wherever you go. So obviously, it's phenomenally powerful. Okay? It's kind of around. In fact, at least many countries have rolled out 3G. We should have rolled out 3G, but for the fact of politics, okay? And so what happens is that, okay, each one of them, I think the underlying one is faster, better, cheaper. So we are really talking of orders of magnitude speed, orders of magnitude betterness in terms of reliability and functioning, orders of magnitude of cost advantage in terms of cheaper. So we can store more, we can transmit more, you can process more. So of course, what do you do with all that? That's interesting. Okay. We'll come back to the applications, but let me also take it from another dimension. See, one of the difficulty also, one reason why many countries are looking at India with a little bit of envy is the fact that we got into an industry which seems to suit us well. Okay? So what happens is, to a large extent in this industry, the competence is basically people. And thank God that, we, country of billion people, we can actually look at ourselves as an asset and not necessarily as a liability. The second reason why, Indians, for whatever reason, we keep talking about the plurality of this nation, like being able to kind of come to terms with many, many things. So also what is happening is that the IT is kind of not necessarily limiting itself to one industry. It is kind of getting into many other industries and tucking themselves into it. I'll give one example. In 2007, a company called Nokia found out, to its horror, in a positive sense, that in 2007, they have shipped more cameras than all the camera manufacturers. Remember, camera manufacturers are almost 100 plus years old. At least the mainstream is at least about 50 plus years old. All the camera manufacturers, the Canons of the world, the Kodaks of the world, the Sonys of the world, by an order of magnitude. So in 2007, Nokia sold more camera-fitted phones, 3 times than the actual number of cameras sold by Canon, Sony, and Kodak. Okay, so it's very interesting. So what happened was, camera is viewed as an addition to a phone than as a standalone stuff. Okay, so what made it happen? Digitization. Cameras became digital. Okay, so once cameras become digital, what happens is that if you really look at it, there are 3 things which is started digitizing quite independently. People are kind of trying to digitize, the fax machines, the usual scanner. Scanner is a way to digitize what is called the documents. That happened quite independently. And the camera industry standardization happened quite independently. And then the video cameras digitization happened quite independently. And because of this underlying digitization, we also got into areas like medical imaging. Today, ultrasound is inherently digital, and more of X-ray is getting digital. CAT scan was also digital, and MRI is getting digital. So what happens is, all the imaging which you associate with medical is getting digital. And once we do it, I'm sure that we have people from the BRC and stuff like that. Some of the advanced manufacturing, we all know, manufacturing uses a lot of these things, like for inspection, etc. Okay, the industrial imaging gets digital. And what used to be considered a completely different industry, if you go back to the industry classification codes for kind of publishing statistics for the country, used to have office automation, Okay, people used to have copy machines, duplicating machines, fax machines, etc. There used to be a category. They all now got tucked into, because today a multi-function copier and printer does scanning, printing and copying. So what happened was your whole range of industry is kind of getting merged into what we call the computing, communication and consumer electronics industry is all becoming one industry. And I don't know how many of you probably have noticed, even this low-end Nokia phone, which cost about 1100 rupees. Okay? Interestingly, 190 rupees of this is software. Right? So that is the reason why India gets an advantage, because we have been doing reasonably good job of software. So what happens is, okay, software gets in everywhere. In fact, some of the new generation projectors have reasonable amount of software there. So you start putting software into any of them, and like most of the cameras have software in them. So the scanners are full of software. So okay, and of course the MRI has a very high-end software. The digital X-ray machines have high-end software. So you find right now it's a confusion, because what happens? To give an example, that GE has been the world's #1 in ultrasound scanners. And GE found the best place where they can actually look up to the next generation ultrasound happens to be Bangalore. And when the typical cost of an ultrasound was about $15,000, they gave a target to this Bangalore team that you should make it in sub $1,000 and quietly bring it to about $100. Okay? They essentially use a form factor which is like a laptop. They actually put a lot of laptop function, because you can actually have some nice reporting. You can have an email so that you can send the ultrasound across, etc. And finally got made in Bangalore, which is actually getting produced by another manufacturing facility of Wipro right in Bangalore. So what happens is, primary effort is software there. They just use commodity processors, commodity memory, etc. etc. So it is actually a PC which actually has a little more extra stuff, okay, and essentially transforms into ultrasound. Okay. Now the same thing is happening with X-ray machines. Okay. So what happens is, do not limit IT to the very traditional form of computers. Okay. IT is getting into, okay, photography is dominated by IT, video is dominated by IT, the document management is dominated by IT, and you all know that music has become, see, this country was probably the 4th country where the digital music sales increase the physical music sales. There's more sales, like, I don't know how many of you probably might not have come across this number unless you work with telecom. This country consumes about 1 lakh rupees worth of music are sold. 1 lakh rupees worth of music are sold every 1 hour in this country through ringtones. People just, they do it for 6 rupees and 3 rupees and 4 rupees. But remember, 400 million are doing, 340 million are doing. 340 million cell phones. So what happens is, music is getting, cinematography is getting, animation is all becoming computer-based animation. Gaming, Xbox alone is $26 billion. PS2 is another $27 billion. And Wii from Nintendo is another $20 billion. $80 billion. Just 3. And all of them are basically nice computers. Okay? So medical imaging, surveillance, security. So what happens is, this is where I keep saying that IT is becoming invisible, because it's kind of transforming and going into many places which you normally do not associate normally. And I'll tell you something else, people work for companies like Siemens, people work for companies like ABB, people work for companies like Philips, etc. And they used to talk of industrial automation. You take a huge power plant, of course you have nuclear power plants, we have people from NTPC, NHPC, a lot of big controls. But if you open up the controls today, they all run some Intel commodity processors, and the protocols have become standard industrial Ethernet, and they use a standard memory, and they all use standard operating system like Windows and Unix. So the industrial automation is pretty much an IT domain. Okay? So what happens is, thanks to the commodity processors and network automation, process control. Of course, the Intel president made a nice statement. Okay, an automobile is nothing but chips on wheels, and a car is nothing but chips on wings. Okay, so the amount of, like a typical automotive today, which cost about, I'm taking of the Western world, about $10,000, about $1,100 is IT, hardware and software. Software alone is about $450. So things are kind of changing. So in that sense, we feel happy because India is a country. So we don't have to really look at 100 billion or 200 billion. We can really look at much larger. We are about 50 billion today, but we can grow to 500 to 1,000 billion. Okay, and of course, ubiquity is happening. So in the sense, computing is everywhere. Sensor networks are happening. In fact, I think Microsoft and Department of Science and Technology started some very interesting experiment, kind of putting a lot of sensors in the Himalayan glaciers and kind of constantly track any micro movement so that much before the things happens, okay, we can detect. Okay, it is possible today because of extraordinarily low cost and high reliability of the processors. Okay, okay. So what happens is, okay, what is that we like? As teachers of computer science, what I like about computing. So right now what we find is, I think at some point in time, unfortunately I don't think we do a good job of introducing it in the curriculum, because I think what kids learn is a programming language or some junk stuff about the structure of the computers, etc. But I think computational thinking, just as mathematical thinking, economic thinking, maybe environmental thinking is part of basic education. Computation will become what is called a basic science, okay? And much of basic science would not be possible without computing. Just give examples, the DNA, without computing, the genome sequencing could not have happened. Many of you know the four-color conjecture in mathematics was completely proved on the computer, so mathematics. And of course, many of you would have seen that there is a person by name Jim Gray. Unfortunately, he kind of disappeared, literally disappeared into the sea. We still don't know that he's alive or dead several months back. And he had made something called worldwide telescope, in the sense that any student in any part of the world, as long as he or she has access to the internet, can have a very sophisticated astronomical laboratory on his or her table, thanks to computing. And of course, I talked about imaging, which gets into medicine, ecology, environment. Okay? So in some sense, it is becoming a basic science. It's also becoming basic technology, because with manufacturing becoming more and more automated, and robotics, much of robotics is all software today. Inspection is again imaging. And of course, IT is changing the business. Other day, I happened to be a kind of advisor to Canara Bank, like we opened one of their core banking center. I was just kind of making a remark to the chairman, which he also agreed that, okay, the little place of 3,000 square foot is actually the bank. Because anything that happens anywhere in 2,400 branches of Canara Bank and few thousands of ATM actually happens out of control there. So in a sense, banking has changed. I don't know, at least if I talk to our students, most of them never go to the bank, right? You do it on the internet, you do it for their phone, etc. So banking is changing. Of course, in fact, the airline industry completely moved to e-ticketing as of July 1, 2008 or December 1, 2008. Okay, paper ticketing is gone. Okay, railways is the largest e-commerce transaction in this country, and even buses. There's a Bangalore-based startup called Red Bus. You can book tickets in Bihar, sitting in Bangalore. Okay, so we are kind of changing each one of them. Banking is changing, education is kind of changing. Digital library, like one of the things which we feel bad, we always used to think an academic institution has classrooms and libraries. And computer science professors just don't go to the library because they never have to go. It's not that they are not reading, just that everything shows up on the screen. So we are kind of changing, and I'm sure that IT will become the foundation for social science. Computational linguistics is all about computation, econometric modeling. So in that sense, we're also seeing computing becoming basic to all the human endeavor. Okay, I'll probably spend a couple of minutes on two things which are likely to probably make my vision of invisible computing possible. Cloud computing is kind of coming. Okay? To give an example, see, many times when you talk of a new application, many of you would have got some application implemented in your organization. You ask some fellows, write a software, load the software, kind of check the software, read the document, etc. I'm sure many of you use a hosted mail like Hotmail or a Gmail or a Yahoo Mail. You realize there's nothing, right? You don't have any special software, okay? And you don't know where it is stored. You don't know where the computer is, but you are actually able to get what is called email as a service completely over the internet, okay? So this is what we call the cloud computing. In the sense, computers are somewhere, that means the processor which used to be central to the computing is gone. The storage that is central to the computing is gone. We don't know where it is stored. Okay, so, some of you, if you are not really kind of come across this number, a company like Google runs million plus servers, million plus. So at any time, a few hundreds of them are down, but nobody has to know. It's all done somewhere, There's a nice little software which keeps looking for them, which keeps fixing them. If you can't, it sends somebody comes and fixes it. But thanks to the fail-safe nature of their file system, you don't even notice it, excepting occasionally. So this cloud computing. The second thing is you also need a business model of cloud computing, and this is what we call sometimes utility computing. People take the example of electricity. There was a time when General Electric started, they were selling generators, right? They were selling bulbs, and they say, what do you do with a bulb? I need electricity. So they sold generators. But today, you don't see it, excepting maybe as a backup generator, okay? So, you buy electricity and you have a mechanism of metering, you have a mechanism of paying, so you essentially pay per use. We all have seen that with the cell phone we are actually using. So SaaS is software as a service. How do I buy software as a service, okay? And with mobility becoming available, that means, mobility is no longer limited to laptops, right? Mobility is, in fact, today's mobile phones are actually more powerful than yesterday's PCs, okay? So with these three things happening, there's a business model of utility. That means you pay and you kind of pay as per your use. There is a formal mechanism, you have so many minutes or so many bytes, okay? Or you have flat model, all those things are there, okay? And you have cloud computing coming. So what happens is, Mr. Kailasanathan will not necessarily have to run a big data center, okay? So what happened, the computer center managers will be there, but the computer center may not be there, See, many of the institutions now slowly kind of withdrawing from running the model, many universities, and Indian universities included, we have completely given it to, Google has something called Google Apps for my domain. So, okay, Google manages everything else. All our students, their email, their chat, everything happens over the net. All that I do is I have an internet pipe. Okay, so it's very interesting. Okay, the libraries are in some sense gone. The computer centers are going away. It's not that education we are compromising. We are actually doing more education than what it is. But it is the way in which computing. That's where the invisibility comes. And of course, mobile platforms are the ones. Okay, many of us feel that they are going to be the primary vehicles, in the sense the PCs, the terminals, etc. I'm not saying they'll go away, but they will not going to be the primary forms. And of course, we had the Palm Pilot of the first generation, the MP3 player of the second generation, the iPhones of the third generation. Okay, they're morphing, but probably they will quickly kind of stabilize. And remember, mobility is actually kind of affecting everyone. Okay, voice became mobile. You no longer have to go to a telephone booth. The telephone is in your pocket, right? Mobile phone. And we all used to go to the computers to check mail. BlackBerry kind of changed it, mobile mail. We all have to go to a tape recorder to listen. That got changed earlier by Walkman in a pre-digital world, and Apple iPod in the digital world. Video Walkman is around, okay? Amazon Kindle has not been a great success, but still a few millions have been sold. Amazon prices it very high, it is $349. But hopefully once it becomes $30, you will actually see many more people, because reading books on Amazon Kindle is, you feel almost like even the icons are like this, you kind of touch the top of the page turns, okay? And of course, camera now everyone has, and the smartphones essentially provide, you no longer go to a computer for the internet. So mobility is kind of, okay? And key applications, I'm just kind of putting it again. Banking has changed. Most of the banks, public sector banks and private sector bank, thanks to core banking, the concept of a branch is gone. You can go anytime. You can do anytime banking. You can do anywhere banking. Hopefully government will also change. You don't have to go to the government. Government will come to you. And of course, the open courseware of MIT essentially talks of how can you provide education anytime, anywhere. Things like telemedicine are kind of trying to take the healthcare to the person rather than necessarily people going. And the design and manufacturing are kind of changing. The pharma industry, if you actually visit any pharma industry, all that you see is computers, right? The labs have become peripheral to the computers. Earlier, the computers were peripheral to the lab, okay? And let's just kind of, the reason why we possibly have some amount of, the good thing is, thanks to a broad-based education and the fact that we also have English language access and the fact that we can cope with complexity, the fact that, we all every day kind of drive in Bangalore roads, we might curse, but I think it does something to us. We can survive, right, under chaos. So what happens is that, for typical, Western education is great, okay, but typical Western educated mind finds it very difficult to kind of go across, and suddenly you find that what you came and what you are doing are completely different. So this kind of transformation of this industry, transformation of the industry segments is something which we take to it without any great problem. And that is the reason why the industry has been doing very well. The switch used to represent the Satyam, Wipro, Infosys, TCS, Cognizant, and HCL. So just 6 companies, It's very interesting. And what is interesting is what Infosys used to kind of talk about with a lot of pride, and of course others also have been doing it. This particular stuff, companies like IBM and Accenture, maybe 15 years back, when they came to this country, they all said, it is a great model, etc., etc. But now every one of them is actually copying that model. And obviously Harvard and Stanford have a case study on that. So in a sense, what we have been doing seems to be, okay, was it done with necessarily great thought, etc.? We don't know, but we might have slipped into it, but nevertheless, we seem to be doing it right. And of course, we are kind of adding about 500,000 jobs. Okay, there are some problems of slowdown, etc., the next couple of years. And even, even in this stuff, Infosys and TCS would add about 20,000 each of employees. Okay, so they're planning to add 30,000. They've scaled it down, but they will still add 20,000. So in that sense, we still seem to be, and this particular global delivery model is used by American companies, German companies, French companies, Israeli companies like Ness, Chinese companies like Huawei, Japanese companies like Toshiba, Australian companies like, I forget the name. Okay, so many of them are actually now starting to kind of use this model. And okay, we are also kind of not necessarily, this is something which again not widely known. It is true that bulk of our revenue come from services, but quietly in the last 10 years particularly, a lot of things have happened. We have not been as successful a product like Microsoft Windows or Linux, but we do have our own kind of share of success. Tally now is used to by about 500,000 people around the world. So 500,000 may not be very large when you really talk of 100 million users for Microsoft Windows, but still it's there. iFlex and FlexClube and Infosys Finacle, these are they kind of manage among them about 20% of the global core banking market. And it's very interesting, both of them actually happen out of Bangalore. Okay, and Subax is another interesting company. going through some financial trouble in the sense that they have been losing money, but nonetheless, they have some amazing products in the telecom space. Okay, Portal Player used to be the company, which no longer exists, but a Hyderabad-based company, and it got acquired a couple of years back. They essentially made the audio codec for the first iPod of 2001. Okay, and Hycal Magnetics, a Bangalore-based company, we also do some amazing work in some focus segments of hardware. Every cell phone will have typically 2 microtransformers. And 60% of the microtransformers of Nokia phones come from one company in Bangalore called Hycal Magnetics. Okay, ImpulSoft essentially unwired the iPod. Okay, we have product design company. These are very interesting. One company called Aztec, which now got acquired by Mindtree, had made 1,000+ products, but the product ownership is not with them. Some company wants a product, Aztec will completely make it, okay, and give it to them. They get paid for what is called product services. So in a sense, we do make products, but we still don't know, excepting for Tally, iFlex, etc., how to make a product, how to take it to the market, how to service it, how to brand it. Okay, we are learning. So similarly, we have Symphony, etc. And great product companies like Adobe and Microsoft, a lot of things actually happen here. Okay, there are some parts of the products whose complete ownership is in Bangalore. Sasken, motor razor from Motorola, they actually are powered by a technology from a company called Sasken. Itium supplies DSP algorithms for the top 3 brands, electronics brands in Japan. And of course, TCS has been kind of building its brand. Okay, so in some sense, computing is growing. So the growth trajectory is clear. But what happens is, it is no longer growing as one industry. It's kind of going and influencing many industries, kind of transforming them. So to some extent, it is hard for anyone to say what is IT. Okay, and at least 3 of the major industries, computing, communications, and consumer electronics, are kind of merging into one. It's kind of funny. Okay, nobody thought that Sony and Microsoft would look at each other as a competitor, because everybody thought Sony is a huge electronics giant, and for some of their small line is called a PC business, for which Microsoft is one of the vendor of an operating system. But from nowhere, Microsoft decided to get into an area called gaming machine, decided to make Xbox, and as of last quarter, Xbox 360 sold more than Sony's PlayStation. Okay, so a company like Hewlett-Packard, which used to be only a computer company, suddenly started competing with Sony, because HP started making cameras and televisions. Of course, they kind of pulled out of it presently. But okay, so what happens is, no one knows who is a competitor, no one knows who is a partner. So in that sense, the industries are changing. And because applications are going everywhere, so software is getting into every possible item which you could think of. Okay, and the good thing is, because we have been doing software reasonably well for so long, we have been doing consistently well, we are the cheapest in the world, and in many respects we are actually better than many in the world. Not necessarily the best every time, but in many places we are also the best. And more than anything else, we can scale. I don't think that there is any country in the world which can actually match in terms of number of people who are actually being trained. Maybe there's a problem of quality, all that. But quite often we as teachers realize there are good students who don't need teachers, so they still manage to do it. Otherwise, we can't explain. There are so many colleges where there are no teachers, but they still produce good students. We don't know how, but nonetheless, it's happening. So because of that, we see a great potential for India. Okay, and recalling. Okay, so IT is slowly becoming invisible technology. You will see IT everywhere. Many of you would actually be kind of doing IT, but as I keep telling my students, that we may not call ourselves IT for long, maybe 20 years, 30 years, and we will kind of get tucked into whatever you do. I think you will be a better power engineer, but what you will be doing is software day in and day out. But you will not call yourself an IT engineer, but you will call yourself a power engineer. Okay, and that is where this industry is going. So obviously that in about 40 minutes, what you do, because this is a huge industry, this is a huge area, so what I could do is that I give a particular perspective from my own point of view. Don't have to necessarily agree with that. So what we'll do is next about 40 minutes or 35 minutes, we would kind of make it open for questions. Feel free to ask any questions. The chances are I may have an answer. Okay, thank you. Please. Yeah. 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 Right. If you could speak into the mic, it would be better, sir. Yeah. 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 I could see your face. We are one of the writing. Yeah. Now it's better. Yeah. No, I can hear you. So light is the problem. And you know how it is. If you can't see the face, you can't give the answer.
I'm very from here. My question is that India is one of the best paid. The thing here is that we get paid for what we do.
Yeah.
If you see in Microsoft, who has got Windows and any other products, if you see any other CAD/CAM software companies like CAD/CAM, they get work done by us. They have the product to do. And they sell and they do enough money. If I understand that once Windows is generated as a software, and Bill Gates and his company keep selling it, and they keep making money. When we provide a service, we just get paid for that time. We don't generate money again and again. Because our manpower used, once you do the job, like you were mentioning, your mind does a lot of product, but they are not no products. With all this kind of brain power, why we are not able to generate our own kind of operating system or our own product, where we can sell it to others? That's my question.
Yes, excellent question. So I think this is something which bothers not you, but many people. So I'll probably take a couple of minutes because it's a little longish question. Okay, so longish answer I need. Okay, see, you are perfectly right. But are you a Bangalorean, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you know MTR. Okay, look at the story of MTR. So this is exactly how. See, what you do is you start being cooks, right? And once you kind of people start liking your stuff, then at some point in time, I say that, look, I just will not be a cook, but my cooking expertise, I will put it into something called MTR and make brands, okay? And software industry is no different from cooking, okay? But remember, you have to be first good cooks. If there are no good cooks, you can't have the products. Luckily, what we have happened is that, okay, because this industry initially needed a lot of investment in computers, etc. Computers were expensive, and of course the finance guys were terrible guys. They go on putting this duty, that duty, custom duty, uncustom duty, God knows, okay? So, okay, because of that, so we also needed some of these biggies like Microsoft and IBMs and HP to come. They could give jobs to our sons and daughters, etc. But luckily what is happening is, okay, apparently this was the same story in Taiwan about components. This was the same story in Japan about automobiles. Okay, you started into the services business, but at some point in time, there are people who say, yeah, I can actually do much better. That is how iFlex. Remember, iFlex was acquired for $1 billion, 5,000 crores. At that time, dollar was 50 rupees. Okay, so what happens is a bunch of people could produce a product worth that much. Okay, Finacle is at $200 million this year. Okay, so we are coming. Okay, so you will see more and more products happening. But one also has to realize that some countries like Israel or Ireland, because they're very small, they could actually take a position that we will only be in the top end of the value chain. But India, because we are a country of 1 billion people, we should move up the value chain, we should move down the value chain, we should hold on to the value chain. In the sense, we need jobs at all levels. Okay? So in that sense, we should not look down on the services job, because if we keep talking ill about the services job, nobody would want to do these jobs. These jobs will quietly disappear to Philippines and Pakistan and Bangladesh. Okay? Let us not do that. So because as long as there are decent jobs, well-paying jobs, demanding jobs, taking care of a large number of people, but you will see products happening. Subex, you will be surprised. Subhash Menon is the guy who started it. You know, Subex product, when it actually became number one, you know, it was something very humbling for many of us in India. It actually upstaged Hewlett Packard, which is a $120 billion company today. 3 years back, they could upstage that. Okay? So those things will happen. Coming back to other example, you know, sometimes you realize that some of the key segments are very difficult to displace. Entire Europe, so many countries coming together, they wanted to create a competition for Windows. It went nowhere. Okay. Sometimes this has to do with some deeper things, you know, one has to get into industry, structure, etc., etc. But just because we don't have operating system, we don't have to feel bad. In fact, when cloud computing comes, there is no need for operating system. Okay? So you'll actually see that there are different ways in which you could actually do it. Because the traditional computing processor-based model itself is being questioned. So we still have enough to grow, and we'll still have. So, but please remember that this country has a little bit of a habit of kind of talking down certain things. Let us not talk down on the services, because we need services, but products are happening, and Tally is a classic example. And you'll be surprised that even in CAD/CAM area, there are some amazing niche products that are actually coming from this country. You don't see that, okay, simply because they are not in the consumer market, okay. They are sold to some manufacturers who make tools with which something else happens. Okay? So we are slowly getting, so if we get it right, I think about 20% of our revenues will start coming from products. And remember that, you know, this country never produced products in many other areas. Only in the last 10 years, you know, we are actually seeing designed fans, designed washing machines, etc. Because otherwise we had the nice, I remember in Kanpur, we used to have a nice cooler, you know. A lot of fellows with the dabbas, right? That is how we were making, you know. So things are changing. So at least I am an incorrigible optimist. Thank you. Yeah. Please.
Nice listening to your forecast of the future of IT. I have two questions.
Yeah.
The way in which we projected the IT progress is more on consumerism.
Yeah.
Consumerism and that too high-end consumerism. And we are a country of billion people, and we know that what will we do in this high-end consumerism? Doesn't touch the common man. I'm afraid that it will lead to disparities more. And you would foresee a role for IT in my saying this. This is one. So the other one is that we seem to be happy doing computing at a very low end. I think the high-end computing in the sense that image sensing or satellite, like a lot of high-end computing and high technology manufacturing, be it atomic energy space, whatever, there is a lot to do. Are we leaving this to the West? Are we now looking into a place where we can do a lot because we have the intellectual property?
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So I think the first question, you know, it's true that, you know, like we all take a particular position for a lecture, etc. You see, what happens is the visible aspects of IT are definitely in the consumerism, and I use the word, as you use the word, high-end consumerism. And how does it benefit the common man? Okay. So remember that some of the stuff I said, you know, it's very interesting. Okay. Unusual things have actually happened in this country. You know, like right in Bangalore, there's a company called Infineon and a company called Texas Instruments, which for the world designed what is called a $20 cell phone. Right? Reliance actually sold cell phones for 666 rupees. And they sold 2 million of them in 2 days. This is world history. There is an association called GSM Association in the world. They got very interested by the Indian one. They gave a world competition, and that is how the Infineon and the TI came to design a $20 chip, $30 chip, etc. So in that sense, even though cell phones started as a high-end consumer stuff, it has actually touched the common man. You know, today, 340 million people, you know, the total number of landlines which we had, okay, at the peak was 46 million. Obviously done over about century plus. It is actually shrinking. So we have. So in that sense, at least there is one thing called a cell phone which reaches. The second thing which possibly many people may not know, that there are unusual things happening with cell phones in this country. Okay, a company like eChowpal is actually able to touch the agricultural people. Okay, and you'll be surprised that there are a lot of micro bankers who are actually using the well-known stuff that's written about is the Bangladeshi Grameen Bank. There are equivalents of them. ICICI has a subsidiary called Fino, which actually doing it. So in that sense, it is kind of touching. Telemedicine, etc. And I also feel things like e-governance will start getting delivered through cell phones. So it will actually touch. Okay? So I personally feel that, as Professor C.K. Prahlad keeps talking about as the bottom of the pyramid. See, India has actually proved time and again that we can do things at 1/10 of the cost compared to the world. So in that sense, we are in a position to reap the benefits of technology because we're able to do. Okay? But remember that many other things have multiple dimensions. Okay? So there will be some people who will say that, look, television is actually spoiling the people because they're all watching movies. That is one side of it. The other side is television is at least kind of making things available to everybody. Whether people watch movies more, we have to leave it to the people. Okay? So I would say that, look, it is not that IT is promoting consumerism. Okay? But inadvertently, like as the famous statement goes, it seems when the printing press was invented, there was a Christian father who was so happy I can distribute copies of Bible to everybody. And before he could do that, porno was distributed more. But you can't blame the printing for that, right? So in that sense, I would say that it is not by design we are doing consumerism. No, hopefully more education is actually happening thanks to IT. More healthcare will actually happening. More access to government. So these things do bring about equity. But in the process, we'll go through some amount of, but the idea is not to create inequity. The idea is to create equity, in the process some amount of, okay, this is my view, so you don't necessarily have to agree. Yeah.
About 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Can you please, whoever has a question, please keep your name tag so that we can identify how many questions are there. And in that case, we can take more questions.
Sure.
And then you can
Sure.
respond.
Okay, just quick thing, Yeah, the second thing, sorry, I just had one more question about, are we kind of leaving out? Actually speaking, it is not. But remember that, you see, to a large extent, okay, what many of you do, many of you come from the labs, etc., okay, because of many reasons, okay, you can't even share. So we actually don't know because nothing gets written about, even the so-called, quite often we can't talk about it. But it is not that we do low-end. And remember that, see, one of the mistakes we should not do is that, people think word processor is low-end. In fact, word processor is the most complex piece of software to write. In fact, a high-energy simulation is much easier to write because word processor is used by millions of idiots around the world. Okay? So what happens is, okay, particularly when you talk about imaging, okay, some very complex amount of imaging actually in the medical field as well as seismic field gets written about right in this country. Unfortunately, the clients could be international ones. But if you start engaging the same engineers, you also will benefit. Okay? So, and one more thing, let me make this one, professors can get away with controversies. For whatever reason, the public sector and the labs, etc., in this country have not been able to attract the youngsters who come out of our institutions for many reasons. At least there is one company which is changing called HAL. Okay, I do expect that more and more of you will change. Then you will find atomic energy, space, etc. At least space has been a little bit better. Okay, so I think if you can channelize the energy, okay, so people are now ready. People are solving complex problems right now because the fellow who writes a check might be a consumer for some market. The fellow could be an outsider. But once you start writing the check, and once you give the charges, they will start doing it. Thank you.
So, Professor Sadagopan, since
Yeah.
there's time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I will make it short.
What we can do is perhaps we can take more questions.
Yes.
And then you can respond.
Sure.
And by the order, Dr. Govardhan.
Yeah.
Okay. You see, okay, security is an interesting stuff, okay? See, there are lots of things which are, okay, IT can help security, yes, that is actually happening. I myself put a large number of systems in an unusual place called Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam in Balaji temple in Tirupati, okay? So that is one part. Question is, how secure the systems are? What happens is that, any area which initially happens, you kind of go on faith-based stuff. When people initially built houses, they did not necessarily design the locks, right? Much later, the locks and the doors came. IT is no different, okay? So already computing is changing. In fact, we are now starting to teach, even in the very first courses, what is called secure coding, okay? And possibly it will take another 5-10 years before people get this integrated into their thinking, okay? And remember that, you should also remember, security, okay, you are secure until somebody breaches it, okay? So there is nothing like absolutely secure forever for everything, okay? So that is, but, you ask this question, how often you went to an ATM and found that you could not take your money or somebody else has taken away your money? And remember that this country does, because we produce a report for this, so I know exact numbers, this country does about 6 million transactions a day. Day after day, 6 million transactions are actually happening. That means things are reasonably secure, right? Otherwise things would not have happened. Okay, it does not mean that some smart fellow can come and break it. Okay, but this is what is called acceptable, pragmatic, usable security is there. So I don't think that we should worry too much about it. But yes, this is an area where constantly we kind of go and build and build and build. Okay. Yeah. 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 Yes.
My question is, one of the fundamental things that IT could probably do for this billion population is take e-governance right up to the village level. Yeah. And this hope existed in this country for the last 20 years. We could have done it, and it's quite easy to do. So what do you see the future for e-governance? It hasn't taken place to an extent like it could.
Yeah, that's okay. So it's very interesting, E-governance could have started even 20 years back, okay? Yes and no. Because what happened was that what happened, computers were very unaffordable even 10 years back. See what has happened, until something is available in 5 to 10,000 rupees, okay? It is not affordable in this country, okay? PCs actually started getting into the 10,000 range only in the last few years. Second thing was, communication was very expensive. Many of you who are actually, people like Kailas Nathan for Titan and all, they have been kind of using high bandwidth, etc. Communication was very expensive. And what we feel that the cell phones are likely to change is the fact that, we are talking of, remember that a landline rental used to be 600 rupees a month. Now you can actually get for 100 rupees a charge, right? People can, my wife uses a cell phone for less than 100 rupees a month. So you can actually do that. So it is becoming affordable. But the broader question is something for which, there is no technical answer. How interested are the governments wanting to reach the citizens? Right? So that is a very different thing. You can't, okay, if governments do not want to share, okay, so you really can't do much about it. And there are genuine reasons why governments do not want to share, and there are not so good reasons why government do not want to share. That is a change management question, psychological question, politics question, organizational question, etc., etc. I think some of us possibly may not have the answer. You should talk to the right administrative reforms kind of people. One part of it, even today, things like many of the certificates, etc. When you go there, people turn off the server. There's one way by which they don't want to give it to you, because they feel that, it is not the right thing. So this is outside of technology. But I think, particularly with the mobility available, whether it is a cell phone as a device or the cell phone infrastructure as a connectivity. See, today you don't have to put a wire, right? I can put a data card, right? So I can set up any kiosk and put a data card. So this part of it, IT would have served. But ability to keep the data and wanting to serve the data is something to do with change management, mindset. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yes.
From Department of Science and Technology, Delhi.
Yeah.
Sir, the question is somewhat different from others. Today US has got the highest number of psychiatric patients, and the highest amount of R&D is for antidepressant drugs. Right. Okay. The kind of a problem with the sociological imbalance created, mainly through this IT intervention, is already we are able to feel it. Today in the Indian scenario, you can see that India is going to be the hub of diabetes, and it is also getting the maximum number of child-related problems, children issues. So, how we are going to tackle, this kind of creating imbalance in the society through IT? Several times it is due to the sedentary life, and also the children do not have the natural way of enjoying the parents. Today, IT sector couples who migrated in thousands to US, they have a very unique problem. So, having seen many activities, are we not going too fast, towards this sector without creating a sense for balancing this both the ends? Already we are paying the price for industrialization. How global warming, ozone layer depletion, greenhouse effect, and all these things are being paying price for it. So what is your view with regard to IT, invisible technology?
Excellent. The social side, okay. See,
I'm not necessarily a social scientist, so probably I may not have necessarily the competence, but nonetheless, I will tell you as my view. See, what happens is that any growth, okay, that is why we use the word growth pangs, right? Any growth comes with both positive and negative. There is nothing in the world which is uniformly positive. I think the greatness of human beings is that whenever something happens, okay, the positive side gets done, the negative side gets unleashed, and immediately people kind of start springing into action, kind of try to kind of take care of that, and we keep growing. Okay? So you really look at these two scenarios. Okay? So what happened is there's about 2 million people, okay, who actually got the jobs. Okay? Immediately they're happy that they got the jobs. They have actually good, well-paying jobs. So because there are incentives, they try to work more and more so that they can make more money, etc., etc. Okay, but obviously they don't. They neglect the family, they neglect the children, etc. But luckily, what happens is that after about 5-10 years, okay, by the time they see their friends around, they see others suffering, etc. We actually see that in the last 20 years, our own students going through that. See, in 20s there is a certain amount of exuberance. By 30s, they start getting tempered. By 40s, they actually get back. And you will be surprised that, while on one hand, we keep talking about the IT jobs being, sedentary jobs, etc., you will find that at least in some other places, if you actually go around in Bangalore, some of the companies, if you go to Philips campus, etc., okay, so the number of people who are fit consciousness is much higher, because inside the campus you can have a gym, you can swim, you can do, and many places where they would not have it, they actually have it. So it is also happening. But how do we kind of take it to everybody? I don't know. But my feeling is that, you ask these people, right? If they did not have this, they did not have opportunity. If they did not have opportunity, they would have been far more unhappier, etc. They wouldn't have. So now that, this is the same problem, right? I keep talking to my students. They ask me to describe my early childhood. I said it's terrible, because we belong to a generation of rationing. So I feel very happy that this current generation, because there is no ration, they should be happy. But sometimes I also feel they go other way, because they end up eating junk food. So I had a problem of malnutrition, they have a problem of obesity. But hopefully some solution will be found. Because remember, life never goes uniformly. That, I think unless there are problems, people will not think, right? So maybe we create problems, and I am sure next generation will find solution. Okay? So, but my privilege, otherwise, let me also realize that, once Mr. Narayan Murthy went on a very interesting statement, right? Okay, if we don't create wealth, we'll be busy distributing poverty. Yeah.
I have a social question again.
Yes.
One of the aspects of this technological boom
Yes.
has been that the systems are becoming more user-friendly.
Yes.
Anybody, high school student or even grade 5 students can use it. But it is also, and it's also reaching the very common people, a wide number of people. It is also creating a social factor which is bringing in cybercrime. I have noticed that in some of the developed countries, they have come up front with the information technology to frame what is known as the cyber law. And the other one is the cyber police. In fact, the cyber police in the United States nowadays are paid twice that of a normal technologist. And some of them work from their home, assisting the FBI and the CIA. In our country, you are the technology experts. What are you telling the government to bring in the cyber law and to create the cyber police? Otherwise, we will never come to the end of our investigation in mobile carnage.
Yep. Okay. Good. So it's, this good thing about IT is because it touches such diverse areas. Okay. So once again, we have no expertise on it, but I tell you, all that we would take credit as IT technologists of this country is some of us are kind of sensitive to some of these things, and India is the 12th country in the world to actually have a cyber law, the IT Act of 2000. Okay. I understand it is a badly written piece of legislation, that apart. Okay. So what, and right in this, NASCOM, in fact, I also was there for the inauguration, Canara Bank and all. We have created what is called Cyber Police Station. Okay. So what we are doing is we are created a cyber police cadre. Okay. So this is what we have been able to do, put it in the IT Act, put it in the IT policy, Prime Minister's task force, Chief Minister's task force, etc. But I think we still are not being able to get our act together. Part of the reason is that, unfortunately, police in this country is such a brutalized, politically brutalized organization. Okay, so the reality and the intentions, there is a huge gap. All that I would say is that, okay, the law, okay, in fact, we have a mechanism of constantly refining the law. But that mechanism is not working because law ministry is not doing it. Okay, so, but I'm not putting a blame, but I'm saying that, you see, the police as such has been, the political interference is so bad. If you actually see, each of the policemen to me is a hero because at such terrible circumstances they are working. Okay? And why did we put it in such terrible circumstances? I don't know. Okay? So I would say that the professional level, the intellectual level, honestly speaking, we have started acting on it. But the implementation is far, far, far from satisfactory. And I think, we are not an American agent, but I think what we have not learned from countries like in United States is that translating an intent into action to a reasonable level of perfection is something which we have not understood at all. So at this point in time, things are just terrible. That's all I would say.
We'll take the last two questions together and then you can respond.
Yes. Okay, so if we get time. So she's the boss. I'll go back.
I didn't see your name flag.
The question has to do with the long-term future of IT. Right. India is, taking advantage of the situation because of three main advantages it has. One is
take the other question and then answer
And
it.
maybe the two questions,
Yeah.
Dr. Gangadhar and then Mr. Singh.
Yeah.
My question is, lot of this e-governance is helping a lot in organizing many of the government activities. But still, there is a class of people, a group of people in universities and organizations, they oppose the IT, this e-governance because it is taking away the jobs. So what is your advice?
And with my question is, with this new president and all in USA, right, he has announced some policy and all, right, what will be the effect on our country? Because we are churning out a lot of our PE, computer science graduates and others, okay, about the job.
Yeah.
And what policy actions you are going to take to see that they continue to be, our country continues to be number one?
Okay. Okay. That's good. Let me take it in the reverse order. Okay. It's easier. Okay. So the US policy, okay. See, what happens is that, see, every political person knows that certain statements he has to make and certain actions he has to take, and they need not necessarily be related. This is how the politics runs all over the world. Okay. And US is no different. Okay. And however much Obama might make statements that, he should actually keep the jobs, etc., etc., it is not that Americans are giving the jobs to India because they love India. Okay, they love dollar. The Bhagwan is dollar, right? And we are definitely much cheaper. That's why it comes. And that disadvantage is not going away very soon. Okay, maybe it will go away at some point in time. Maybe 50 years from now, I don't know. I would say that, look, at least next 10 to 20 years, okay, because this advantage will be there, jobs will continue to come to India. Okay, there may be some ups and downs again. And what is that? It is necessary? Yes, US is a country where what they call, influencing the politics, or so-called lobbying, is important. And lobbying is a perfected professional art today. I think the country actually has to do it, and appropriate Ministry of the External Affairs, etc., have to do. But I don't think. Second thing also related to that, there are also jobs opening up in the European area, in the Asian markets, particularly the Japanese market, etc., etc. And Indian companies have already started looking at those things. Okay, excepting for the impact of the slowdown, which is going to be for a couple of years, and we still do not know the impact of Satyam because it has a lot of impact at the psychological level. We still don't know because we are too close to it. Okay, barring that, I don't see too much of a problem. But yes, there could be, even now, there are a large number of people who don't get jobs. See, even the 300,000 production, people are not been getting jobs. So with 500,000, some people are not going to get jobs. But as long as quality products are there, and thanks to our English language and the fact that computing is common, so we will have jobs everywhere. So I think the youngsters would probably find a job somewhere. So, excepting marginal problems, I don't see a major problem. Sir, coming to your question about the e-governance, see, what happens is that anytime something new is introduced, the vested interests oppose. I understand that there used to be a job of what is called as scribers, people who will write out the judgments in the London court. So 5,000 of them at some point in time. When the typewriters came, apparently everybody opposed. But those fellows who did not learn typing, they lost their jobs. But exactly 3 years later, there were 50,000 of them. So there were 50,000 jobs created, the 5,000 people objected. But the 5,000 people could also have got it if they have transformed themselves, or at least they could have outsourced it to their children. At least their children could have learnt it. But I think those who did not get it, they go through the pain. There is a pain, we can't deny that. But in the larger run, it was a gain. So I think the same thing will happen. I think once people see the benefits, however much people might say the electronic voting machine has contributed certain things, right? Earlier people are not even sure whether, certain things happened. But at least, so in a sense, you talk to the common man or woman, they actually feel the benefit. Today, at least I know in some certificates, etc., this Bhumi project of Karnataka, at least 6 million people feel that it has made a difference to them. Okay, has it made a difference to the entire 3.2 crore people? Not at this point in time, but at least 6 million had happened. Hopefully it will become 60 million. Hopefully it will become 1 billion. So, your last question, sir. Okay, it is a little complicated question. are not necessarily doing things. Okay? I think once again, we have to kind of wait for certain things to happen. See, as a country, remember, we are still at a very early stage again. And we do certain things good, we do certain things not so good. But the fact that we are doing certain things, we should give it credit. Okay? And over a period of time, things will change. But at this point in time, all that I would request you is don't kind of look down that we are doing the low-end things, etc. It's not that we are only doing low-end things. There are lots of things are done, but many of you probably do not even kind of come to know. But that is how it is. And the so-called the American domination, etc. I know that is not worried too much about it. So one day, I think, at least I believe that a leader is a person who is felt and who is not necessarily heard. And hopefully we think in IT, India will be a leader who will be felt and who is not necessarily heard. There would be the quiet dew that actually makes a difference to the agriculture and not a big thunder shower which will make a lot of noise and run away. That is our motto. Okay. May not have answered your question completely.
On China.
Yeah.
China, will they catch up?
No, one side is that you see the China part, okay, you see, time and again this question comes, will China overtake us? Some areas yes, in some areas not. Chinese said they will put all their television. You'll be surprised, the most successful television in the world happen to be Koreans, LG and Samsung. And surprisingly, because I can tell that it's paramount of personal knowledge, there's a lot of software in today's television that all gets written in Bangalore, some of my students. Right? And Chinese television has done no difference in this country. Okay? And similarly, my feeling is that Chinese are great competitors. And I think they should continue to give great competition. The manufacturing industry had the same feeling in 80s and 90s. But look at Titan is doing such a good job. And Chinese dumping their watches had not made Titan irrelevant. The fact is that Titan does great things. And what Titan is able to do now, Chinese are wanting to copy from. So some of our software companies, you'll be surprised. Infosys and all have given red carpet welcome. Along with a professor of MIT, some of us wrote reports comparing Chinese and the Indian software industry and stuff like that. And Chinese still, but I can tell you this much because one of the good things of being a professor, we go all around. A lot of Chinese students also, my students whom I taught in US. And they actually believe that India is going to give them a hard time. And to me, it's good for both of us. Because unless we have a good competitor, the best in us will not come. And I want China to compete. And again, I'm a professor. If my sons and daughters, my students, kind of take it easy and they give in to Chinese, let the Chinese have it. They deserve it. If you are not working hard, you don't deserve to get it. So I don't think we should really build the protection, etc., etc. In the long run, the only thing that wins is hard work. There is no substitute for prosperity. So as long as our boys and girls continue to work hard, I think we'll have a great future. And Chinese can only kind of help us by putting us on the map. And it's good to have competition. That's my take. Thank you.
Request Mr. Sheshagiri Rao to make a concluding statements and a formal vote of thanks.
Professor Sadagopan has made the invisible technology visible in the Sadagopan's classroom here. And sir, we are thankful to you very much for the inspired lecture. And he has touched upon the broad technologies involved in the processors, computing, as well as the key players which are contributing to 6% of our national GDP here. And once again, let us thank Professor Sadagopan for the excellent lecture. And also thanks are due to our Sangeeta Menon for organizing such a lecture here. Thank you.
May I request Mr. Keshuri Rao to give this NIAS minute on behalf of all of you, of course, participants and NIAS.